So, hi everybody, I'm Graham Duncan. I'm Chief Executive of Right to Succeed. We're a charity that focuses on place-based change in communities in the bottom 10% of the indices of multiple deprivation. We are going to run through quite an agenda today with you, bringing together a fantastic cast of people involved in the North Birkenhead work to this point. So first of all, I'm going to give a quick introduction to the North Birkenhead Cradle-to-Career project. We'll talk about a little bit about where it came from, the basic principles that it's based on, what happened in discovery, etc. I'm then going to hand over to Elizabeth Hartley and Kerry Mehta, who are going to take you through the Cradle-to-Career family support team. And then we will pass on to Justine Molyneux, who will talk about the role of the family connectors. We'll then do a quick Q&A with Elizabeth and Justine, and then we'll hear a little bit from the team on the ground in the multidisciplinary team itself, talking through their experience of what it's been like to work on the ground in North Birkenhead over the last year and a half. A quick Q&A with that team, and then we'll do a quick close and final reflections and let you all get back to your day. So hopefully that was broadly what you're all expecting to see and hear today. So without further ado, I'll take you on to where this first started from. So actually this started with Steve Morgan himself. Steve Morgan set up a round table a couple of years ago now, and essentially Steve was very frustrated that they have put a huge amount of kind of funding into great projects in and around the Wirral and kind of Liverpool City region and some of North Wales. And their frustrations were kind of twofold. One, they wanted things to be a bit more joined up. They were putting things into individual programs all around the region, but weren't seeing that add up to kind of system level impact. And then the next thing they weren't seeing was some of the learning that was coming from this work starting to influence the way the system itself works. So Steve brought together a round table of different stakeholders from across the region and from across the charity sector to start to talk about, could we do something a bit more joined up that works together with the system to really start to drive change. And momentum really built from there. Alongside Steve Morgan Foundation, very quickly, Shine became very involved. And we started to work with them and Wirral Council in particular, which is where Steve wanted to start, to try and understand actually what could we do together more effectively for some of the communities that have been most left behind in the area. So very quickly, and I'll talk a little bit later about how North Birkenhead was kind of first chosen when I introduced Elizabeth. But discovery work started in North Birkenhead in September 2019. We're currently in discovery mode in Holton Lee and Holton at the moment, and doing discovery work in Northwood in Knowsley, with a view that we will hopefully start doing some discovery work in Liverpool, Sefton and St Helens from this following kind of autumn, September time. So first of all, this started with a bit of desktop analysis and data gathering, starting to try and understand who we thought were the key stakeholders in and around the community of North Birkenhead. And that quickly led us on to community consultation, school and youth focus groups, briefing and informal consultations, interviews with the local leaders, and facilitated community consultation sessions, particularly with our friends at the North Birkenhead Development Trust. The COVID pandemic, of course, hit halfway through. So what went from being a very face-to-face driven exercise with lots of big sessions in community and community centres, in schools, etc., quickly became a lockdown exercise, which became a real challenge, as you can probably imagine. But despite that, we managed to work with the community to deliver the discovery work on time. We published the findings. You can find the report on the Cradle-to-Career website, and I'll take you through some of the kind of headlines of that right now. But the thing to kind of get across with the discovery exercises, as well as trying to set up for delivery and trying to be really clear what the priorities are, who needs to be brought together to do that. This is also about building relationships and building understanding of each other's mutual challenges. Different people see the community and the challenges in that community in different ways, depending on the lens they are looking through. And a very big part of this exercise is bringing a very wide range of stakeholders around a table very regularly through the steering group to really understand what is actually going on, how other people perceive the challenges and priorities of that community to be. So with that large group of people starting to come together, the things that we started to hear over and over again was, unsurprisingly, the intergenerational cycles of low aspiration and expectation. This community, like many communities like it, had lost its primary industry of shipbuilding to the global economy. So it wasn't like the jobs went down the road, the jobs went to places like Southeast Asia, etc. So there was this growing rise of poverty in the place, and all the kind of issues that come with poverty around mental health, etc., were starting to kind of build. We saw a lot of unaddressed mental health needs for children and young people and adults alike. So this sense of the impact of poverty and the stress and strain of living in those circumstances having a very negative effect on how children and adults perceive themselves. We realised very quickly through the schools that there was a lot of inconsistent identification of needs, particularly around things like special educational needs, SLCN, speech language communication, I should say, social emotional needs, etc. So there's real need for the schools to start to become absolutely kind of world class at how they identify and start to meet needs within their cohort. And then there were rising levels of youth crime and antisocial behaviour, generally still quite low level, but seeing to rise year on year on year, and everybody becoming a little bit concerned about what this could lead to if unchecked further down the line. So the steering group, having heard everything it heard from the community around it, from each other, started to settle on three kind of key priorities. And the thing about this kind of work is you will hear about 20,000 different things you really want to do something about, but the real important stuff is really about starting to understand what are the causal factors here that are really driving quite a lot of those issues, and prioritizing ourselves down to relatively few things that we can do really, really well. Because actually what you tend to find in communities like this is they're low on confidence. You know, all the press says very negative things about them when it's out there. And actually what we want to get people used to is the understanding that they can really make a difference when they work together on things that are going to be effective for that community. So the three priorities that came across: education, so schools becoming world-class, identifying the needs and meeting the needs of their learners. This started particularly with literacy and reading, and we'll come on to that in a minute. Family and services. So Elizabeth was round the table throughout the whole of Discovery, and still is a member of the steering group today. And all that she heard led her to think, right, there needs to be a new way to how we deliver services in this place. So there was a huge amount of work done to improve the support of vulnerable families, to hear their voice, to ensure that they are healthy and happy. But what was required was a complete service redesign, which is the thing we're going to focus on particularly today. And then the community itself, giving the community back ownership of its own development, of how it understands and meets the local needs. And particularly the community wanted to focus on how do we improve things like our pride in the place, but also how do we start to improve things like the youth offer to give young people a genuine alternative to some of the more negative activities that were starting to rise within the community. So what then came next in terms of delivery? This is a slightly complicated diagram, but I'll take you through it step by step. But at the centre of all of this is a steering group that is bringing together stakeholders from across the community, including residents, those from the public sector, our funders, the community sector organisations as well. And through that, you're bringing together all the kind of lenses that you possibly need on the various issues that are felt within the community of North Birkenhead. So then if we build out the three different priorities, so family and services, which is what we'll focus on today, so I won't spend too much time on this, but sitting beneath that steering group is a working group, the family and services working group, that brings together stakeholders around that particular element. We have the multidisciplinary team that we'll talk a little bit more about in a minute, and the family connectors as well, who are the kind of friendly front door, if you like, to that multidisciplinary team and kind of wider community services in and around that community. On the education side, there is an education working group that brings together the primary, the secondary, the early years cohorts, the college, to start to work together on the key kind of education outcomes that they're trying to deliver. I'll show you a little bit about the data of what they've been able to do to improve literacy in the first year of delivery, but they have gone above and beyond expectations, to say the very least, in what, as a set of schools, they've been able to achieve. And the project that's rolling out right now is a shared SENCO and educational psychologist. So the schools have appointed a shared SENCO who is essentially ensuring that the practice within the schools is as good as it possibly can be, and starting to look at how further intervention and support is built around that. And we've also bought kind of bespoke educational psychologist time, because, as is probably common in just about every local authority, the waiting list right now for education psychologist visits can be as long as 18 months. So getting that support in earlier has become a very strong priority within the school settings. And then the third element, which is the bit that's been most disrupted by the pandemic, with youth clubs and community centres having to close their doors and staff away on furlough, etc., has been the community side of things. But in there again is a community working group bringing together the key stakeholders from across the community sector organisations. The key elements within that have been the community seed fund. So this has been seeding resident-led ideas that would improve life and well-being for children, young people and families within the community. There's a big piece on community engagement, so ensuring we are consistently hearing the voice of the community, because, as you can imagine, we've been concerned throughout the pandemic that actually the priorities of the community might be changing as a response to the pandemic. So just keeping a kind of eye on that throughout has been incredibly important. The big piece of work that's kicking off right now is the coordinated youth offer. So how does every child in North Birkenhead know what is available to them at any one moment? But also, how do we start to overcome some of the social barriers to young people, for example, going to the Hive, which is an amazing youth centre in North Birkenhead, but actually children from North Birkenhead are about a mile away from that and don't feel particularly safe, crossing several kind of boundaries and passing other groups of children along the way. So how do we start to overcome those social barriers? And then the Pride of Place campaign, which is kicked off with a kind of series of murals looking at former great residents from North Birkenhead, but also the history of North Birkenhead, to try and raise the pride that young people have there. And there's been other things like litter picking exercises and all that kind of thing, just to tidy the place up a little bit, to give a little bit more pride. And then between those three segments, there are also projects that look at collaborations across those sectors. So if we start with the one at the top, the attendance panel pilots. So as you can imagine, one of the issues that's really kind of risen during the pandemic has been school attendance. Some children have not returned to a normal attendance pattern after the schools returned. So the attendance panel pilots see the schools and the multidisciplinary team coming together, working through on a case-by-case basis, sharing the understanding they all have, because of course the school has one understanding of the family, the multidisciplinary team has another, putting that information together and starting to develop the strategies that will work for those individual families is the way that we're kind of piloting to kind of move forwards this piece of work. There's a services collaboration fund that's just been launched. So this is about how the community sector in particular can bring additionality to what the multidisciplinary team already has. How can we have an even greater kind of combined offer to the most vulnerable families within North Birkenhead? And then the child criminal exploitation training campaign is particularly between the schools and the community organisations. There is a lot going on there to unpack in terms of the route by which children are starting to become first involved in kind of criminal activity. And actually, there's a very deep piece of work now which brings together children themselves, community organisations and schools, trying to understand actually how do we stop that flow of young people starting to become involved in crime for the very first time. And then the role of Right to Succeed in this is we're kind of the backbone support. So we're trying to make sure all this activity at all times is pushing forwards in the right way, and that everybody around this has the resource in hand that they need to actually do the work. So that combines a range of kind of activities from partnership management to supporting the implementation. So helping the schools, for example, understand what the data they first got when they did the kind of broad assessments of child need actually meant, and helping them start to think through what some of their choices might be about what they do about it. Community communication, so there's a website, there's a Facebook page, which is what typically gets the most engagement from the community, and there's other kind of social media work as well, but just also then bringing all of these groups together, making sure they all understand what's going on, they're clear about the decisions they have to make, etc. Funder reporting, so kind of keeping our funders, keeping our commissioners kind of up to date with where we are, seeing them relatively regularly to kind of tell them about the progress that's being made, and then the kind of the governance support, so making sure all of those steering groups, working groups, etc., are working very effectively, know their budgets, know where they've got to on different bits of implementation, etc., and know what the key challenges are that they have to work through. So hopefully that makes some sense, but this is what it actually starts to look like on the ground from a kind of project perspective. So having told you a little bit about how the programme is kind of structured, and I should say as well, that is unique to North Birkenhead. That's their priorities. It's what all the stakeholders combined have led North Birkenhead to. The solution will be different from community to community on the basis of the very unique set of circumstances that community has, whether it be needs, the assets they have, the personalities around the table, etc., have a massive influence on the direction of travel of any one of these projects. So what is here is unique to North Birkenhead, but I'm sure there are probably elements in there that feel like they would fit with other communities as well. These are some of the kind of outputs from year one, and we'll go on to talk about impact in a moment. But I think for me, the most important statistic here is that nearly 2,000 children have now been reached and benefited in that first year of activity. And what's been very impressive is, despite the kind of pandemic circumstances, some of the outcomes that have been achieved. So let's focus first on the education outcomes. So the schools in North Birkenhead have gone above and beyond anything we could have expected them to have achieved in year one. And that's a normal year one in general, never mind a year one under pandemic exercises, under pandemic circumstances. So at the start of that year, we use a platform called GL Assessment, which is a very well used, very effective kind of measurement platform that works across about 90% of secondary schools now. It's used by the Education Endowment Foundation in a lot of their trials. So it's a very robust measure. And when we ran the kind of baseline data, we saw that children on average in the cohorts from year 5 to year 8 were 15 months behind expectation. Now, to put that in context, when you look at children from disadvantaged backgrounds, they are expected to start primary school about 4 months behind. They finish primary school about 12 months behind, and they finish secondary school about 2 years behind. So there was this gradual kind of falling away in disadvantaged communities. So North Birkenhead was actually lower than we were expecting. We were expecting them to kind of come out somewhere around about 12 months behind expected reading age. So 15 months was a bit of a shock, but I think the thing to bear in mind with North Birkenhead is it is a grammar school area, of course. So the schools in the secondary schools in North Birkenhead, of course, lose some of the more able children to the grammar schools. So they have a slightly deflated kind of cohort from that context. But what they then managed to achieve across that first year was absolutely fantastic. So on average, across the whole cohort, children gained 6 to 7 months above expectation, above expected progress in that year. The thing to then bear in mind is nationally, the national average dropped below national expectation. So in secondary schools, they lost about 2 to 3 months. In primary schools, they lost about 1 to 2 in general. So not only has North Birkenhead kind of beaten the expected norms quite handsomely, they've probably gone further than anybody might have expected during a pandemic as well. So in all, they're coming close to closing half of that reading gap. And the thing that's then really pleasurable to hear, and we see this in a lot of places that we've worked, is you've now got schools reporting that actually the kind of culture within the school is changing pretty quickly. Young people are clearly starting to understand more. The teachers feel a lot more confident teaching literacy because they've seen the effect it's starting to have. And you just get this sense of a virtuous kind of circle starting to be created here, where one teacher was talking last week about how before this, they'd essentially lost all hope that they could actually make a difference in this community. And then through this work, they're actually starting to realise that through doing a few things really, really well, they can actually drive some great improvements in outcomes. So we're very proud of what the schools in North Birkenhead have been able to achieve in that first year, and excited to see what they can achieve in the next few years. Now they're getting into the routine of doing this kind of work and this kind of implementation. And then I won't spend too much time on this slide because I'm about to hand over to Elizabeth and Kerry in the not too distant future. But a little bit about the community support team. So this is the multidisciplinary team with the family connectors based within the community, which Elizabeth will take you through far more detail on in a minute. But what Elizabeth and the team have done is compared their statistics that they managed to deliver in the North Birkenhead context to what was achieved across the whole of Wirral last year. So social care step down rates were about 3 times what was achieved in Wirral in North Birkenhead. It was about 50% higher in terms of the social care closure rate. And then a statistic I think they can be incredibly proud of is, of all the children that returned to their families from social care in that last year, 100% have sustained living with their family, as opposed to 77% across the Wirral. So I think that's a remarkable achievement considering the year that we've all just had with COVID, etc. So those are the basics of what this is in North Birkenhead, where it came from, and what has started to come together in and around that community of North Birkenhead. We have a very, very simple motto that no single organisation can solve the problem of inequity alone, but together we can. And I think that's kind of typified by what's happened in North Birkenhead. This is a huge number of individuals, a huge number of organisations coming together to work collectively to solve some of the problems that have gone unsolved in that community for many years. And I think we've got to be humble that this is very, very early days still. And whilst the progress is fantastic from that first year, despite the circumstances everybody was operating in, actually this is a community that's where it is right now because of decades of decline from the pomp of its shipbuilding past. So actually it's going to take many, many years of progress and progress and progress being stacked upon each other to get to anything that might look like equity for the children and young people and the families that live in that community. But hopefully we've given you a flavour of where this kind of all came from. But the most important thing now is we'll hand over to Elizabeth and Kerry to talk you through particularly the work they've done on the multidisciplinary team that is now known as the community support team. But before I disappear, any quick questions or comments on this first bit before I hand over to Elizabeth and Kerry? Please feel free to shout because I can't quite see everybody.
Catherine has a hand up.
Oh, thank you. Thanks. I wasn't sure whether I'd waved or put my hand up. I don't use Zoom very often. Oh, Graham, that was tremendous. Thank you so much. I'm Catherine Fairclough from the City Region Combined Authority, and having spent most of my career up until last year as a local authority officer and then as a chief exec, it's music to my ears to hear the kind of collaboration and joined up working that's taking place here. And I was really, really pleased to hear about those social care step downs. And also in terms of I think you described it as children who return to their families. So just had a bit of a query around that, because one of the challenges we always have is around the cost of social care placements. And were there children who were maybe in paid for placements? And is there an efficiency, there's a financial quantification there as well as the qualitative benefits for those families?
So, okay, so on the social return on investment side, we're starting to do a piece of work right now with Liverpool City Region Combined Authority using the joyful Green Book for us to start to really try and understand actually what the social return on investment of this kind of work might be. But if you don't mind, Catherine, can I delegate the rest of that question to Elizabeth and Kerry, because they can answer you in far more detail in their presentation than I can on who those children were in terms of their circumstances and what their circumstances were as they kind of came back into families in North Birkenhead. So I'll delegate that to them if that's okay with you.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. And no, I'm happy just to kind of keep that theme really as we go through the rest of the day. But it's always one of the areas where, you know, you're trying to persuade people to redirect their funding into this kind of work. And this sounds like such a positive model. I'm really kind of inspired by what I've heard. So thank you.
Thank you, Catherine. Any other questions before I hand over to Elizabeth and Kerry? And please just feel free to shout. Okay, I will take silence as golden in that case. So I'm actually going to introduce Elizabeth, and I will let Elizabeth introduce Kerry. So I'll introduce Elizabeth rather than through her role title and what she does for Wirral Council, but rather through the experience that North Birkenhead has had with Elizabeth to this point. So after that roundtable with Steve Morgan Foundation, we were introduced to Elizabeth and a colleague at Wirral Council, met them in their offices, started to talk a little bit about what this was, and started to get their views on where this could be most effective. There was a pretty unanimous thought very quickly from Elizabeth and her colleague that this should focus on the North End, which is what North Birkenhead is known as locally. And Elizabeth then came with us to that very first steering group and was there throughout the whole of this. And I think what Elizabeth did incredibly well was she listened intently to everything that the community had to say about their experience of living, working in North Birkenhead. And I still remember to this day, about 6, 7, maybe 8 months in, Elizabeth suddenly sent me a paper and said, this is what I'd like to do next in this community. And I remember opening up that paper and being utterly shocked at the scale of ambition and, frankly, the career risk that Elizabeth was willing to take to start to meet the needs of this community. So it's very safe to say that in the eyes of North Birkenhead and the steering group in particular, that Elizabeth is a true hero of the North Birkenhead Cradle-to-Career project. So without further ado, I would like to pass over to Elizabeth to introduce herself properly and introduce Kerry as well, and then talk us through their experience of setting up this team. And Elizabeth, I'll pilot the presentation. Just tell me when to hit for the next slide, okay?
Thanks, Graham. And you're too kind with your words. You described me there as being a bit kind of courageous maybe, but I think from my perspective, it would have been foolish not to have got on board. It felt like there was no other sensible suggestion. We'd been pouring resource into this area for years and hadn't seen any difference in outcomes. Referrals into social care were still really high. Children going into care were really high. Something kind of drastically different had to happen. And I think from my perspective, you threw us a lifeline with the conversations, the bringing together, the community organisations. So yeah, it felt like a no-brainer, but I appreciate your words, Graham. And yeah, we've taken some risks, but so far they seem to be paying for us. So I'm Elizabeth Hartley. I'm Assistant Director in Children's Services in Wirral. I've been with Wirral Council for 13 years. So I've seen a lot of changes, lots of comings and goings and trying things differently and starting again and rethinking. So I've been with the borough for a long time. I know this area of Wirral really well. It's always been one of our priority areas. My area in my portfolio is early help and prevention. So a whole range of services from early years in children's centres right through to contextual safeguarding, youth justice, youth offer, etc. So a broad area. Unfortunately, I'm not going to be able to introduce Kerry today, Graham. She's not been able to make it. Hopefully she'll be able to drop in soon. It won't affect the presentation today, so don't worry, we'll still cover everything. But I think one of the reasons that I wanted to invite Kerry along was sometimes, and maybe this is just a chip on my shoulder, sometimes when you're in the early help and prevention arena, it can be seen as, well, it's nice and it's luxury and it's a bit fluffy, but what's the big impact on the social care aspect? Kerry's our Assistant Director for Social Care, and I thought it would have been really good for you today to have been able to hear from her about the big impact on social care, and to know that our Assistant Director for Social Care is right behind us with this initiative as well, because they can see the benefits. But hopefully the data will speak for itself in that area. I've met loads of you before, and it's nice to see some familiar faces. I'm not going to cover some of the things that we've spoken about before, about motivation to do this, what we were aiming to achieve, etc. Today I want to focus on what's happened in the first year, what we've achieved, what we've learned, and how we're continuing to develop. Next slide, please, Graham. Okay, so the first year that we're looking at in terms of delivery is from October 21 through to September 22. And it's really important to remember that the first 6 months of this, we were in lockdown, and really limited to the engagement that we could have on the ground, which was kind of gutting, to be honest, because one of the things that we were all really determined to do with this project was to almost remove some of the screens between council services and public services and communities. We wanted the team to be based in the heart of the community, to be really visible, to be walking around streets, to be in the centres, to be having coffees in the St James's Centre alongside families and getting to know people. So it was a little bit of a setback that those first 6 months were done more virtually. What we have seen though is since those restrictions have been lifted, people have absolutely thrived and loved being on the ground. And Angela, who you'll meet later, has been on allotments and playing out on streets and all kinds of stuff, which has been really satisfying. But what the team achieved in those first 6 months of getting to know organisations, schools, getting to know each other as a team was quite phenomenal under those conditions. Next slide, please, Graham. Okay, so the main successes that I'll talk about today, and the team will talk about as well, is that collective working around high needs families. So we have had quite a focus around those level 4 cases and how we work with those, and we're already seeing quite a lot of success there. I'm going to talk a bit about our preventative working, because lots of you have seen the 10-part childhood offer before, and we're looking at all aspects of the childhood journey, and we're really beginning to start to make a lot of good progress around things like early years support, access and play and youth groups, that whole sort of community support around families to keep them away from statutory service. But one of the really overwhelming things that I'm sure will come across when you meet members of the team is how much staff and everybody involved really believe in this model, how committed they are to it, and how much they've learned about the importance of place and being part of a much wider community where families live. Thanks, Graham. So this has already been touched on before about children that have been successfully stepped down from child protection plans. You'll see there when we compare the Cradle-to-Career team against the wider Wirral rates, it's far more significant with the Cradle-to-Career team. It's probably important to note that when we started this programme, we didn't introduce new resource. So we used the resource that we already had within children's services, and we deployed differently. So when the team came into place, they took on the work that was already allocated in that area. So any child that was open to children's services and social care, whether it be as child in need, CP, those cases were transferred into this team of which has got 4 social workers and a social work manager. So they were having to pick up some cases that have been open for a while, some were much shorter, and really establish relationships, get to know those families, and then work those cases. But 29 of those stepped down within that first year, which was incredibly good outcomes for us. Next slide, thank you. Again, those cases that were open, we've had 132 cases closed, which again is a much higher rates. The re-referrals as well, about the fact that we are keeping those cases then out of social care, is really important. And I think the community support team working together in this way, when they have access to family workers, early years workers, domestic abuse workers, etc., drugs and alcohol, because they can then get support into the families really quickly from within the team, that's having a really big impact, because there isn't waiting, there isn't referring on to other services, activities happening immediately. And that has a really big impact on how quickly we can deal with issues and de-escalate. The other thing that's really important then is about sustaining that. And I've always been a big believer that, you know, the community is the most important thing for families to sustain good outcomes. If they've got relationships with people in the communities, if they get support from local organisations, if they will turn to school and talk about problems, if they'll go and see their GPs and access those universal services, their chances of sustaining positive outcomes are much greater, increased. And that's something we've seen, and something I think the team have really begun to value. And I know Kerry, who wasn't able to join us yet, from her social care perspective, really started to learn a lot about how important those community organisations and universal services are in supporting families post-social care, and how those relationships, that investment with them really does pay dividends. Just for clarity, that Family Matters, that's our level 3 family support service. So we have 3 full-time family workers from that service within the team, again, working together as a team around these cases. Thanks, Graham. Yeah, so that's not too easy to see, but you can see that downward trend. So this is some data that shows in the Bidston St James ward, for which the Cradle-to-Career team covers, the referrals over the last 3 years have dropped significantly. And I'm sure this is something the team will talk about in terms of their relationships with schools, having regular conversations with the schools about families they might be concerned about, and being able to deploy that team really quickly to meet needs as early as possible. And I know, Catherine, you were asking questions about cost benefits, etc. But it's this kind of evidence that can show that Bidston St James, which has been one of our top 5 demand wards for years, to be able to demonstrate that quite significant change and drop in referrals to social care, it is really impactful and really good for me, going back to other people, to, you know, to get the support to continue to do this, because it is a big team that we've put in there. The plan for the team was 17.2 full-time equivalents that we already had employed, but that's of significant value. So that kind of data and impact is really important and really good evidence for us having made this investment. Next slide, please. Okay, so I've touched on this quite a bit already about that. This team, one of the things that's been fantastic about them, and I'm sure you'll get a sense of it when you speak to them, is how well they have established themselves as a team, how every role in the team is really valued, and how they work together as a team. Angela, I'm sure, will talk about the way that they have discussions about cases as a team, about how all members of the team are aware of the families and the needs and the role that they each have to play. When things like, if somebody's off, that's okay, because there's other people in the team that know them that will be able to pick it up. So the way they can respond to a whole range of needs quickly in a coordinated way, with the same kind of approach and culture, has really paid great results for families. Those different skills. And Angela, I was absolutely made up, was speaking at an event with social care last week. And Angela's been a team manager in social care for many years. And I was absolutely thrilled when I was sitting in the audience listening to her talking about welcome assessments and school readiness. And she was waxing lyrical about it. And it really made me smile that this was somebody who's been, you know, immersed in social care for years, but is now talking with conviction and knowledge about school readiness outcomes and welcome assessments and stuff like that. So that kind of cross-fertilization of skills, experience, that sharing, that learning has really is really coming to fruition, and we can see it within the team. The stop and escalations I've spoken about in terms of referrals into social care and seeing that change. The team are beginning to get really well known with communities, community organisations and other professionals as well. So they're getting much better with people knowing that in North Birkenhead, that this is the team you should be having a chat with if you're concerned about a child. So don't bang a referral into social care. There's a team here that you can have a conversation with, that you can think about opportunities to work differently with or to engage differently with the families. And that has been really effective as well. And some of the stats that you put up before, Graham, I think there was just short of 2,000 children and young people had been reached by the programme. And just for context, there are just under 2,500 children in the whole area. So to reach almost 4/5 of them within the first year is quite phenomenal. So I just wanted to add that, because 2,000 sounds brilliant, but when it's 2,000 of only 2,500, I think that's even more incredible, that in 1 year, almost 80% of the children that live there have had contact and support in some way or other from the team. Next slide. Yeah, the beginnings of preventative working. The work around prevention has been a little bit slower than what we had first hoped. I do think some of that is because of that getting started during the lockdown periods. I also think that it's probably realistic to expect that the first priority is going to be around those high needs social care cases. Let's keep children out of care. Let's try and get the needs, child protection met. And now that we've got into a really good rhythm with that, and our relationships are developing with other organisations, we're on the ground, we're speaking to people every day, we're reaching out, that the preventative working will really start to take off. One of the pieces of work that the Cradle-to-Career team have helped us to do in preparation for year 2 is to be really clear about what our KPIs are going to be around the preventative work. You'll see in one of the slides coming up, we've done quite a bit already looking at early years, but we're now looking at, right, what other KPIs will we set around the preventative work to make sure that we are reaching out as widely as possible and being able to not only kind of shape how that wider team operates across the childhood model, but demonstrate the impact all the time of how this greater engagement in the early services and the early supports will reduce that needs. Justine's going to come on shortly and speak about the family connectors and how well they're working with the community support team. And I think we've got Karen with us on the call today. I'm sure I've seen your name in there, Karen. But this has been a really important piece of learning, which for you guys might not sound too significant, but we've got an amazing resource of connectors in Wirral who are employed through the third sector. And then we've got our children's services. And I would say probably over the last couple of years, we've never quite been able to merge these groups of workers particularly well. And I think that's really been because of the size of the children's services workforce. So introducing the connectors, forming relationships when you've got a children's services workforce of hundreds of people has been quite difficult. But because this is a place-based team that know each other really well, that can then actually work in partnership with the connectors every day, we're seeing massive benefits. So this is something that we from the local authority want to look at how we replicate that so that the relationships with connectors across the borough can really benefit. Next slide. Little bit of data there for you around the early years. There's 3 charts there. The first one on the left is sustained engagement with children's centres. We've got 3 children's centre hubs and I think 7 spoke venues for children's centres. So that we can see for this area where the community support team are based, that sustained engagement is now beginning to creep up. The chart in the middle is the 2-year-olds take up of their offer. Again, we can see that that is increasing as well, which we're really pleased about, because this part of the borough has always been really challenging for us. What we've not got on there at the moment, but it's another stat that I can kind of put in there, is our breastfeeding rates in Birkenhead are increasing as well. So that's very positive. You see a slight decrease in the 3 to 4-year-old take up. We're not too worried about that. That's something we know is happening nationally as well, that 3 and 4-year-old take up is reducing, and it's not significantly different, those numbers, from what's happening in the rest of Wirral. So we're not too worried about it. We do know we've heard from loads of parents about changes to their own working, living arrangements because of lockdown have affected the take up. So it's something we'll keep an eye on and keep plugging, and next year's kind of focus on our own KPIs will help us to keep working on that. Thanks, Graham. Okay, so this one about belief in the model and the importance of communities. It's really hard to kind of capture this, but I'm sure when you speak to the team, you will get that from them. One of the things that I thought was a real big indicator was when I met with the team a couple of weeks ago and we were kind of reflecting on what's worked, what we've learned, etc. There was this real sense of they will not go back to working the way they used to. What they're getting out of this in terms of support, job satisfaction, enjoying being part of this team, seeing the difference they're making, they're really committed to this is how they want to work in future. And the event that Angela was speaking at, which I mentioned before, was really about the passion that Angela brought to that, to talk to the rest of the social care workforce about this model, how it's working, what their experience is. We've now got the rest of the social care workforce really engaged and thinking about how we could increase this. So at the moment, we're looking at our other 5 priority wards within the borough and how we may replicate this model and hope for the same sort of impacts. Thanks, Graham. Okay, so our next steps, we are going to produce a report about our first year, which I'm sure we'd all be happy to share with you. We'll be taking that to our committee, our Children, Young People and Education Committee in June. We're just gathering up some more of the experiential stuff from that at the moment. We want to get some case studies from families about how this experience has been different from them, from the staff about how this has been different for them, and also get some feedback from schools about what their experience have been of this and how it's working. So we're in the process of doing that. And just while I mentioned the committee, I have to say that we've had a huge amount of elected member support with this approach. They're loving it being place-based, they're loving staff being really visible and in the heart of communities. We've had full support from our politicians on this. We've just done an exercise to review the team, who we've got in it, what we need, what's working, where there might be gaps. And this has been a great piece of work, and I'm grateful to the team for how they've engaged in this, because when we started out on the journey, we weren't entirely sure if we were going to get it right, if we, we had a starting position, and the team have been really good at seeing this as an opportunity to learn, to change, to shape. So we're making a couple of changes to who's in the team and what capacity we need within the team. I think it won't surprise people to hear that one of the things that we're going to introduce is a counsellor. We didn't put any counselling capacity in there, but we will be. So it's great that we're able to be quite fluid about this and make changes. And the staff have been brilliant in their learning about what we can do to make this even better. So we're pulling all that together in a plan. But I think for me, really just to summarise, the experience has been brilliant. We've been working with the wider community, with Right to Succeed, with the third sector organisations across the council in such a refreshing and inspiring way. So it's just been fantastic. I think that might be all my slides, Graham.
I think you're right, Elizabeth. Thank you so much for that, Elizabeth. I think for colleagues from the other local authorities in Liverpool City region, I think, Elizabeth has been very brave to do this. This was before policy innovations like family hubs were becoming common phrases when Elizabeth first put this together. But as you can also imagine, she's had a huge amount of learning, and what they will do in this second year, as opposed to what they do in their first year, will build on that learning as well. So I think Elizabeth should probably also be seen as a bit of a resource to kind of colleagues in similar fields about, if you're going to do this, pick up on Elizabeth's learning from this kind of first year as to how you might go about doing this. Thank you so much for that, Elizabeth. That was absolutely superb. We are going to hold on questions for Elizabeth until we've also heard from Justine as well, and then we'll do questions with both of them at the same time. So Justine has relatively recently become the chair of the steering group of the Cradle-to-Career project, but actually we're kind of introducing her in a slightly different role today, which is she is also chief executive of Involve Northwest, who are the people responsible for this huge army of connectors that work across the Wirral and other areas. We've been very, very fortunate within this project to have two absolutely fantastic family connectors placed alongside the multidisciplinary team in the community centre at the heart of this in North Birkenhead. And Justine and her organisation Involve Northwest are the people responsible for that. So Justine, I'm going to hand over to you. And very kindly, Justine is not presenting, she's just talking, so we can get rid of the PowerPoint for a little while as well. So Justine, over to you.
Thank you, Graham. It's really strange to see a huge picture of yourself on the screen, quite unnerving at times. Hello, good morning, everybody. As Graham said, I'm Justine Molyneux. What I'd like to do is just put a little bit of context about our organisation, which I think sets the scene for why we've been really successful with the Family Connectors. So our organisation has been around Wirral for the past 30 years, and I've been around Wirral for 19. And we offer a range of services from our wonderful community connectors. So I have 40 of those that go out across Wirral. They're a walking mental health service. We have debt workers, we have welfare benefits workers, we've got our own domestic abuse hub for women and children. We've got a mental health team which supports around an IACT contract, and we do employment support. So we're kind of a bit of a one-stop shop. So when we approached Cradle-to-Career about Family Connectors, it was really about replicating the community connector model, being a very visible presence that a family could know they could go and talk to. And one of the first things that we wanted to do was to really get the team right. And as Graham has said, that we were so fortunate to be able to get Diane and Karen with the background that they came from. But what was really important was that we felt that the families were going to be able to engage with the workers, were going to feel comfortable to talk to the workers, but equally that our family connectors were going to be, I think the phrase I used during the recruitment was get down and dirty with the families. So as we know, a lot of our families have multiples of 5 children. So how are you going to feel when you go into a home when you could be on the floor changing a nappy, you've got a child jumping on your back? you're trying to talk to mum about re-engaging her back into the community or doing something for herself and the children in school, how are you going to feel in that environment? And both of our family connectors were completely non-phased because of the backgrounds that they have in early years delivery of services around children with special educational needs, that they were absolutely the right people to join this team. We want the family connectors to work with the community support team, to be part of that team, so it's a seamless service for our families. So it doesn't really matter whether you are part of the community support team, you're a family connector. It is completely seamless where you enter and where you're supported and where you leave whether you finish with that engagement. One of the things that we do with all of our teams is we brand them. So our family connectors are in bright yellow t-shirts with a black fleece, in contrast to our community connectors who are in bright orange. So the idea around that is that if you're walking around the streets in North Birkenhead and you see somebody in a yellow t-shirt, you should know through all the advertising that we do and through all the door knocking that we do, that that is your family connector, and you can approach them and you can talk to them. And it's a kind of safe brand really to be able to use. It's not a statutory service, it's a voluntary service. And I think that also makes a difference. But I think sometimes what that does is it means that if we've engaged with a family, that it helps that integration into a statutory service if that's what's needed, because we do a lot of the groundwork first. As Elizabeth and Graham have said, that, you know, we did start during the pandemic, so all of our ideas and enthusiasm was how do we change and how do we shift that? So Karen and Diane were wonderful about going out and leafleting the whole of the area with leaflets that had pictures of themselves on, introducing who they were. I know that they also went out and played games in the streets when we were allowed to. So we tried to still keep that integration with families, but I suppose at a slower pace introduce what the service is and how it could support. And the area did already know about our family connectors, again, because they're in bright orange. I think the difference about the family connectors also is that having that trusted brands mean that we can also have the time to work with families. And I think being able to say that it's not 6 sessions or it's not 12 sessions, that we have time to be able to work with you to support you. And there's also a safety net there. So if we work with a family, we don't just walk away, because you may need us in 6 months' time because something may alter within your family circumstances. So we are still there. The family connectors are also able to handhold the family to a community connector if that's what's needed, or again through the community support team or one of the services that we deliver, or for the wider voluntary partners across Wirral. I think using the ethos of asset-based community development, that looking at everybody as a gift and how do we unlock that gift, is really at the heart of everything that we do. But if we're talking in the context of family connectors, it's around the family connectors. So how do they find the gift within that family? How do they support mum sometimes if it's around time management, being able to get the children to school, being able to manage the daily life, being able to feed your family. One of the things as an organisation we do is we can provide free food as well. So the family connectors have that network in their toolbox to be able to do that and be able to link people in with other organisations or whatever level of support that family may need. And sometimes that may literally just be a couple of chats at home over a cup of tea and just somebody's listening to them. It may not be on the upper end of the scale. And I think when we're looking at scales of the support that they can do, it can go from something really simple to something at the other end of that spectrum. And each family is so different that we will never know what that is unless obviously they're a referral into one of the family connectors. And I think that the key message, I suppose, from our family connectors is that we work alongside you. So we're not going to do it for you, but we'll do it with you. We will be on your journey with you. And again, that can only happen when those relationships are embedded within the service and within that family, and that the trust is there. And the trust does also come from the brand, from our experience over the years that we've been delivering our services. And we are very visible out on the streets as well, weather permitting as well. I think what I'd like to do, if that's okay, is bring Karen in. I know she's already on the call, and maybe she can give you just a quick case study of a family that we've worked with. Karen, if you're there. You should be. No, we must have lost her. It is a very simple service. It's not kind of rocket science.
Justine, so Karen is here. I can hear her. I don't know if everyone else can.
No, I can't hear her.
Karen, if you want to jump on my
Can't
computer,
hear her.
maybe.
Can't hear her.
Thank you. Hi, Karen. No, I think we've got some technical issues. I'll carry on talking. The connector service, or the family connector service, is a very simple service. It's not, you know, it's not a model that anybody couldn't replicate, but I think it is a really crucial element within the community support team, within the delivery of this project, and within the development of North Birkenhead. And, you know, I'm incredibly proud of how the team have worked really hard over the past just over 12 months now and delivered the services they have, and have been quite creative. And I think that typifies the support is social, it's emotional, it's practical, it's really driven by that individual, that family, and what their needs are. But the support that our team have through the community support team, our organisation and the wider organisations, is really critical to have that real seamless support for that family without then having to pass them on to multiple organisations. It's very, very seamless, which actually, you know, in our opinion, aids things like this to be able to happen to that grandma, to be able to then progress with her life and move into employment and aid that family moving forward. So again, I'm incredibly proud of the team and of Karen and Diane. They are fantastic workers within our team. And I think that's all from me, Graham.
That's wonderful. Thank you, Justine. Thank you, Karen, as well. So at this point, we're running slightly over time, so we'll do a slightly reduced Q&A, but has anybody got any questions that they want to ask Elizabeth and Justine at this point? There's a couple of questions in the chat from Lord Jim O'Neill that I'll pick up on number one, and Jim, I'll answer you separately on 2 and 3, if that's okay. So question one was, this project obviously depends on intense cooperation between many players in North Birkenhead. So to replicate is not even a starter because it all depends on the players. I think that's a really good point, Jim. And actually the thing that replicates is not the actual approach that's been taken in North Birkenhead, but the process that brought people together to get to that approach. I mean, Elizabeth, do you want to talk a little bit about your journey on this from that first kind of slightly stormy steering group meeting we had way back in the day to where we are today?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. And what it made me reflect back on was, I think when I started my input, Graham, I said I felt like Right to Succeed threw us a lifeline. Because I think the role that Right to Succeed had as kind of almost an independent party that brought different people together into the space to have the conversation was really important. It's something that I don't think we would have been able to achieve from a local authority lead perspective, just because of, you know, history, years of different engagements, different motivations about, and sometimes some competition about getting funding, etc., things like that. So I think what Right to Succeed brought to it would have to, that kind of role would have to exist in order to replicate it in other places.
Thank you, Elizabeth. That's really helpful. Lorna, you've got a question.
It's very much along the lines of Jim, and you've heard me say this. From my experience, in the end, you can, you know, I think there is a genius, there is an alchemy in getting the right people around the table. There always has been, there always will be. But actually, you have to have, as Jim's saying, that right balance of attitude and capability in the people that you've got, and resilience, quite frankly. So, how, you know, what are you doing to identify how you sort of the succession that you're going to need to sustain North Birkenhead itself, and then how Jim's thing about how you replicate it is getting down to the sort of the identifying factors that individuals involved or enough people involved need to have to reach the tipping point to take everybody else with them.
Yeah, I think it's a really good question. Justine, Elizabeth, the characters that you've managed to bring together to form your pieces of work in this community, how do you think about how they might be replaced at any point, or how it might develop, how you might grow that kind of cohort of people that could do that kind of role, and what does critical mass look like for you two? Justine, do you want to start this time?
Yeah, I think our role is about building some community resilience. So as part of the Family Connector role, it's about, I mean, there was a classic example with that grandma gaining employment. So it's about building that resilience within communities. We do offer also, we haven't done that with the family, but it's something we can think about, is around having volunteers as well, you know, volunteer family connectors. So we could think about possibly a network in that way. And I think that would be something that would work as well within the ward. I think it's always a difficult question because climates change. You know, we didn't expect COVID, so things change in communities. But from my perspective, it is about building that resilience. So that throughout the project, that's part of our driving force, that those communities are able to live, able to progress themselves, but then able to connect with services that possibly were there before this intervention was there, that they maybe just didn't know or didn't have the skills to be able to do that, is what I would say.
Thank you, Justine. Elizabeth, what's your view, particularly as you're thinking about the next stage with the team and the potential for 5 further replications across Wirral?
Yeah, I think I'd like to reflect back to how we brought the team together as well, because we approached this in a way that was really different to any kind of recruitment we'd done before. So Right to Succeed supported us with what was initially an expression of interest. So we put out some information which was very much kind of value-based and aspirational about what we wanted to achieve and how important the community and the community organisations and the place was. So we put that out and staff came forwards, and we even did things like, you know, we said they could make a video or to write something about, and it was very value-based about why they wanted to be part of this team. And the community were involved in the selection of who was going to be in this team. And I think that was really important as well, because it was more about values and beliefs rather than necessary, you know, your kind of standard, what's your experience, what's your qualifications, etc. And I think that was really important. When we did the presentations to our wider workforce, which was only last week, I have had several people approach me and say, if you're going to replicate this and if there's going to be more, can I go on a list of somebody that wants to be in that group that will be part of the next one? Because what they were getting from Angela and what they hear from the team is just how much satisfaction they're getting on a day-to-day basis doing their jobs. Angela may talk about this, but, you know, in terms of, you know, levels of, you know, staff in the team aren't off, they're excited, they're in, they're contributing, they're getting a lot out of it. And I think that kind of word of mouth stuff as well really has much more impact in terms of thinking about how you would extend this and bring people in. And the data is really helping us to have the business case to extend this.
Wonderful, thank you. We've got, we'll take one last question here from Claire in the chat, which, what was your biggest learning moment and what is your key piece of advice to other areas keen to replicate this? Justine, we'll start with you.
I think the biggest piece of advice is getting the team right, because if the team isn't right, then the end user is not going to engage with that team or with that team member, and you only need one person who's not as enthusiastic or doesn't believe in the model to then put ripples within everything else, and then, you know, your first engagement with that person who you're there to support is finished. And as we know, you know, the word of mouth within communities can be the one thing that actually kills your service. So I would say that for me, that the team and the team working together and having that, as Elizabeth just said, that drive, that enthusiasm, that wanting to do things differently, it would be my best piece of advice.
Great, thank you, Justine. And same to you, Elizabeth. What's been your key learning and what's your key piece of advice?
My key piece of advice would be to have an open mind, to be open to possibility, to really listen and consider all kinds of different possibilities that you maybe hasn't before. Sometimes that's an uncomfortable space. I'm really sorry, Graham. I've got a child on Easter holidays here who's just appearing in the background, distracting me a little bit. So
Say
sorry.
Just Elizabeth, get him to say hello. This project is about children in the end and communities. Hello.
Hey.
What's your name?
Oh, he's very shy. Thank you for that.
Thank you, Elizabeth. That's wonderful. Right, without further ado, let's actually hear from the wonderful team on the ground on this project. What I'll ask each of these members of the team to do is to quickly introduce themselves and their role, but then also to give us a couple of minutes each on their experience of being part of this team on the ground in North Birkenhead. So let's go in the order of the slide. Angela, can I ask you to introduce yourself first, please?
Hi, can you see me and hear me?
Yeah, both ends.
Indeed.
Okay. Yeah, I'm Angela Heatley and I'm the team manager for the team. So I've worked in Wirral for 18 years and as a manager within social care, so managing social workers only. So when I started managing this team, it was, especially with COVID, it was trying to get to know. Even being in Wirral for 18 years, there was some of the team that, to be honest, I've never heard of. So I didn't know about school readiness. I didn't know about community connectors. So it was getting to know them. No one who knows me ever thought I'd be working as I do work at the minute. So we are a team, there's 17 of us. And whilst there is 17, we've established links with other agencies who are not within the core team. So, and how we've worked is, rather than as social care would work, for those who know how they work, it's very much, you know, a contact comes in, social care do an assessment, you then think of who needs to be involved, who do you refer to. So it takes a few weeks for that to happen, and then a few weeks for the person who you've referred to pick it up. That's stopped. What we do is we meet twice a week as a team. We look at the referrals or contacts that have come in, and we look at that family and think, what is it that's actually the need here? So it could be if mum's using drugs, then to me, the obvious person to work with that family is the drugs worker. And this allows for that immediate response to that family to make them changes. So we work with, from my point of view, it's anything from universal services right up to level 4. And it's kind of changing your way of thinking of, you know, the standard is, you do, or the processes have been, you do an assessment. Some of these families, they've had numerous assessments. They don't need another assessment. I don't need an assessment to tell me what this family needs. As part of the team as well, I think was important was building a relationship up with that community. What we know and what I've known from my previous role is that some families in North Birkenhead are very much resistant of social workers, of anyone who's seen as a professional. It was us to break them barriers down, and I'd say we've done that. And an example of that is we've had children on who have come, we've inherited on child protection plans. And when we've got to a point where it's so positive, they do not need that high level of intervention. We've had families saying, you know, we want to stay open to you. And it's trying to say to them, we're still here, but your child does not need to have that high level of intervention. So we have a very much open door policy. So we're based within the heart of North Birkenhead. Families come in and out all the time. They can come to the office. And we've established where, like someone said, that families know most of us in that team. So even if their key worker's not available, they can talk to someone else because they'll know them. So we're very much a team approach to some of these families. And that's worked really well. We've done things in the first year, and COVID was a nightmare because we in order to establish them relationships, we've had to let these families see us in a different light. So yeah, we are social work trained, some of us, but we're still human. So we've done days out with them. At Christmas, we went to a pantomime. I'm involved with, no one would ever thought they'd see the day, with a memorial garden that's in North Birkenhead for a child that had died, and it kind of had been left. So we're working, and not just us doing it, we're working with the community and saying, right, we'll help you get it up to where it should be, to a better kind of standard, and then you maintain it. So it's kind of, it's like, I'm working different to how I used to in social care, because I think you become too process procedure led within social care teams, and I think you need to move away from that, and that's what we've done, is, you know, do it from what is the needs of these families. As part of my role, I also, like someone said, we've got schools within the area, and we've recently started, since lockdown's completely gone, is I go to, we've identified a high school and 2 primary schools where school attendance is a concern. So I meet with them schools now with the Hive, so there's youth workers, and we look at the children who's got real poor school attendance, and what can we do to get them children back into education of some form. That's gone really well. We speak about 10 children each meeting, and we review them at the next meeting, and pattern and things have come up. Like I'd say the first 10 children we discussed in a high school, we identified that 6 of them, it's pretty after COVID, where mental health is an issue. So it's looking at how can we get them their help in order for them then to get back into education. Obviously the evidence is from families is that we, just a bit of a kind of data thing, is that within the 12 months, the first 12 months, we only had to take 3 families to the child protection level. We've been managed to keep them, others, we keep them in child in need, we keep them in family matters, so we haven't had to escalate. And I think my view of that is because we've got the right support in at the right time and the right agencies. Yeah,
Angela, if you don't mind, it'd be great to be able to pass on to
yeah, fine, yeah.
Shortly. There's a lovely comment for you to read from Lorna in the chat as well. Whilst we do that, can I pass over at this point to Nicole? Nicole, can you tell everybody who you are and give a short kind of summary of your experience to date?
Yeah, of course. Thank you, Graham. So my name's Nicole Bailey, and I'm a social worker in the Cradle-to-Career team, and I've worked in Wirral for around 8 years. And when the project was sent out to express an expression of interest, straight away it sparked an interest in me. I think the ethos of the programme is fantastic. I think as a team we've definitely been able to roll with that. and place our own values as part of that community to go forward. And just to mirror what Anne just said, we have broke down them barriers, and it's a strange feeling as a social worker. Families are asking to stay involved or can become a knock, and that's where the community connectors, school readiness workers, family workers play a part of that MDT. I think we're seeing movement with families, there's less drift. If families are escalating or stepping down, we've got the knowledge in the team already of that family. The referral process is definitely cut. So we've got the community connectors where we can speak to them, and that referral's done quicker. So as you know, as social workers, family workers, referrals can build up. It's very time consuming. So we've cut a lot of time out, which means more time with families. My experience in the team has been fantastic. It's definitely the right area to trial the project, and I do hope it's able to roll out across other areas. The relationship being with families is that you've got a lot more time to spend with the mums, dads, carers, the children, and your relationship with schools vastly improved as well. You've got a much rounder picture of the families, and for me, similar to Ange, school readiness, community connectors are not really services I probably would have worked with previously, but now I definitely couldn't work without them. I'm really mindful, I'm probably repeating a lot of what Anne just said. So I don't know if there's any questions people have for me at this stage.
Thanks, Nicole. We'll do questions to the team as a whole in a second, but thank you so much for all your enthusiasm and all you're doing as well. One thing to note here is the team are all based out of a community centre, the St James Centre, which is very fortunately physically based right at the centre of the community. They made a very brave decision to take in the multidisciplinary team at the very beginning. They have an early years centre. They do a lot for families that are facing kind of very great challenges. But what I really loved was their team and their trustees decided that what they wanted to do by taking in this team was transform the relationship between the community and the public sector services, particularly social workers. And I think what Nicole has already kind of set out there gives you a sense of actually how much that relationship is starting to change in North Birkenhead very, very quickly. So that was another kind of brave moment in this project that I think is really starting to kind of reap rewards very quickly. Leanne, can I pass over to you, please?
Yes, I'm Leanne, one of the school readiness workers. So what I'd say, what has changed for us, sorry, can someone just turn off in the office? Sorry, I'm in the office and it's quite working. So in terms of our role, not lots of things have changed. We're still delivering sessions to families, we're completing 2-year funding applications, we're going out on birth visits to engage new parents into universal services and targeted groups. We're completing welcome screenings to help improve speech and language. We're delivering sessions in the community to reduce isolation, and including a brand new group last week, Messy Play session, which attracted over 50 adults and children from the area, which is amazing. The 2-year funding offer has increased in the area. Parents are sharing our contact details to ask for support and funding with nursery places. I even completed an application whilst getting my lunch in Asda with somebody hijacking me at the till asking me for information, which is amazing. We have links with schools who come to us if they have any concerns with children attending their school for our area, and we'll take it to the MDT team meeting and discuss it as all professionals to see how to get the best support for the family. We're starting to deliver a Relaxed Kids programme in school for F1 and F2 children after Easter. So this can help with their concentration, their listening skills, their creativity, their self-esteem and their mental health and their physical health. So that's something we're looking forward to after Easter. So during our visits, we are sign up to parent the Dolly Parton Imagine Library, where children receive a free book every month for the first 12 months of their life, and it's hopefully going to be extended to the age of 5. We're linking into the 1001 Days pathway, where professionals meet every 2 weeks to discuss families who might require extra support. And we're picking referrals up from Children's Centre and the MDT Weekly. The one thing that I would say has changed for us is that professionals are recognising us in our role and realising how supportive we can be for families. Being part of the team, we go out on joint visits with social workers, family support workers to get to know the families, to identify pieces of work that we complete with families. This can be added to child protection plans, child in need, and provides positive engagement for the families and interaction. We complete welcome screenings and get referrals made into service before children are going into settings. We've been providing activities to families to encourage speech and language development through play and learn. We do one-to-one sessions with families to role model activities. This has been really beneficial for parents, and they say they really look forward to coming each week to visit them, with some of them even sending us videos and pictures of how they're completing the activities within the home. We are enjoying being part of the multidisciplinary team and feel like there's something, we are enjoying being part of the team, and one thing that I would say is that I learn something new every day, whether it be something that's happening in the community, a new section with one of the social workers, or just something that's happening, and it's really, really good. So I'd just like to say thank you very much for giving us this opportunity to find out everything that's going on. So thank you.
Thank you, Leanne. That was superb. I hope everybody here is getting the sense of how proud we can all be that these are the individuals that on a daily basis go and work with the most vulnerable families in a community like North Birkenhead. I think there's something superb about that. Christine, over to you. We still got Christine. We definitely had her before. Christine.
She is here, but I think her mic isn't working.
Oh, Christine, is your microphone not working? Well, let's see if we can sort it out. We'll go to Karen in the meantime. We'll come back to you, Christine. Karen, over to you.
Just going to swap seats with Karen. There's some issues with Karen's computer as well. Sorry.
Thank you, Nicole. Christine, are you there? Can you hear us? Oh, well, Nick. Oh.
Hear me? Can you hear me?
Oh, we can hear you, Christine.
Yay. Okay, my name's Christine. I'm a family support worker. I've been employed by the local authority for 20 years. I am absolutely loving being part of this team. It helps me do my job much better. Quick example, I had a family who required support around drugs, alcohol, isolation, mental health, speech and language, domestic violence, and they had no food. It took me 10 minutes to walk around the office because all the services are in one room, and there you go, they had a package of support like that. In the past, this could have took me weeks and weeks, months even, and then you risk losing the motivation of the family in the process. I'm also noting a really good difference in step down cases. So historically, we know families in Birkenhead North don't engage in preventative support. So under this model, family support workers are working alongside social workers. We complete specific pieces of work. So when they step down to level 3, they know us, we've broken down the barriers, the relationships there, and we take them down then to level 3 support, and they carry on their journey along that way. So that's working really well. Can I just hand you over to my colleague, Ruth Ashcroft, really quick? She's got an amazing case study.
Go for it.
Thanks, Chris. Sorry, I've just, can everyone hear me?
Yeah, loud and clear.
Hello. Hi, so my name's Ruth Ashcroft, and I'm one of the family workers on the team. I just want to give you a really quick snapshot of the work that we're doing at the moment. I've worked in family support for 20 years. And I've been working for this local authority for 11 years, very differently on the Cradle-to-Career team, but absolutely loving it. So just as an example, I was working with a family with one of our social workers that was in child protection. So we worked together on the case. This case stepped down from social care from our team, and I carried on working alongside her for the next few months until she had met the outcomes that we needed, and that she felt comfortable without the support. It was still really, really difficult to close this case, which I'm finding with a lot of our families, because they really, really appreciate the support. And they know that when we close to support, it's still really open. I don't know whether I should say that or not, but she will still contact me if needed. I see her all the time. I think, as Chris was saying, just to echo that, a thing that works really well within our team is all that, you know, we all work together. There's other people on the team that have worked with this family as well. And we are just like one big happy family. The fact that we can get in there with the social workers and work together has been such a huge benefit, because we find that from historically, really, it's very difficult when a family will step down because they don't want services involved. They want it to end. But with us, because they know us through that process, going through child protection, it works so well that we're still there to support them when things have stepped down. So thank you so much for letting me jump on, guys.
Thank you, Ruth. That was absolutely inspiring. Thank you so much. And it's lovely to see you're in the surroundings where children might be very at home as well, in a what looks like a lovely shed in your garden. So thank you so much for that. Absolutely wonderful. Karen, can we hear you now? Is it working?
Yes,
Fantastic.
all fine again. Okay, so hello again. I'm Karen, and I work with the lovely Diane. We started our roles as family connectors in the lockdown period. So it's just a lot of our work was out delivering and making connections over the phone. But over the past 12 months, luckily, we've been back in the community. Similar to connectors working across the Wirral, Di and I, we need to be visible. We need to be visiting community settings. We need to be attending events at the community settings. And we've handed out leaflets at all the local schools. So in this kind of way, helping us to be out and about, we lead on a couple of initiatives within the MDT. One of them is the weekly community drop-in. So we lead on that, where community members can be signposted or referred to services they need. Also, last summer, the school readiness workers organised welly walks, and they were really successful with lots of families attending. So we decided to carry these on, and from October we do a walk up to a local urban farm. We've got 2 families that come religiously with us every week, and we've got the funding for families to get a drink, piece of cake, and then we have a really nice leisurely walk around the farm, and it's definitely the highlight of mine and Di's week, and the families really enjoy it too. So referrals for family connector support, community members can refer themselves in. We get referrals from schools, early help, community settings, and more recently Angie's working closely with a secondary school that we've received some referrals off, and I think we're due to get more. I think with regard to referrals, what we've found from working in North Birkenhead area is engagement is the challenge, and that's what we have to work on, and that's where we have to be out in these community settings and community events, meeting parents, having just these relaxed, natural conversations where we listen to parents, and if we feel that there might be family connector support needed, we'll gently introduce this to them. And when we're talking about family connector support, we talk about it as something that's very much their choice. We're not a statutory service. This is about if they want to engage with a family connector support. It's led by them, and we always tell families that they can have the support for as little or as long as they want. More recently, we've had a couple of referrals from community members where friends of theirs we've been supporting and we've been recommended to them, so that's really good. Just one thing I wanted to say, I'm not going to talk a lot about family connector role because I know Justine did that, but I just wanted to add in, I think a huge factor of the family connector role is the listening ear. And in the discovery phase of Cradle-to-Career, local residents said that they wanted friendship, trust, somebody to talk to, somebody just to listen to them, and that's very much what Di and I do. We've got some families. I support somebody who will just text me and say, "Are you free for a chat?" And I'll phone her back, and we can be on the phone for an hour. But it's just there's a. For instance, that person doesn't have family living nearby, so she needs that support. Di and I are both parents as well. We've both got 3 children. We know the ups and downs of family life, and that's very much our role, that we'll be telling, encouraging parents, and saying they're beating themselves up about not being able to do one thing, saying to them, but look at all that you do achieve and what you do. I'm going on a little bit there, but the listening ear I just think is so important. So working within the MDT, this is really, really successful.
MDT staff, we understand each other's roles, and I think we complement each other's roles. As family connectors, member of the MDT will come to us maybe about finding out about services. The support can be quite reactive in North Birkenhead, maybe for food and fuel help. So maybe MDT staff will come to us about helping them with that. Information shared really effectively within the MDT, and there's a real can-do ethos. I think, as Chris said earlier, things just happen quickly for families because we work together to make those changes for families. In our roles, kind of working on the ground, the issues that we're coming across is mental health, for either or both parents and children, high levels of anxiety. What struck me since I've come into this role is the number of parents who've experienced trauma as children or as adults, and you can see that's still very much impacting on their lives. Children with additional needs, struggling with nursery school settings, long waiting periods for children and young people to be seen by a paediatrician, and this will result in behavioural issues at school, possibly low school attendance, maybe the children eventually becoming school refusers. Housing is a massive issue in the area, with either poor housing or families waiting to be housed. And this, obviously, it's an issue which isn't solved quickly, and it's usually about managing community members' expectations about housing. Isolation is something that community members are still experiencing. I think the pandemic has really kind of has had an effect on isolation, because I feel that there's a lot of mums who've got used to staying in, and it's still quite hard to take those steps to become more proactive in going out more. Just to finish on family connectors, I'll talk very quickly because I know we haven't got much time. An important aspect of the family connector role is supporting community members in achieving their goals. At the sign-up meeting, there is discussion around looking at community members' long-term goals, what they would like to do and achieve. And Di and I will be the people who will help them with those small steps to achieving those goals. And it's been really good in the time that we've been family connectors. We've seen these changes, like the person I talked about earlier who'd gained employment. But this could just be reducing isolation, attending groups and making friends, engaging with services and improving their situations, fleeing from domestic abuse, starting work, volunteering, starting apprenticeships, maybe getting their forever home where they want to live. And then I was going to end on my positive note, but Ruth, you stole my thunder and you talked about that community member. So I was just going to talk about that community member who Di works with. And as Ruth said, her dream is to have a charity shop on Laird Street in North Birkenhead. And she's been successful in obtaining the seed funding, and she's going to start up a charity service. So that's a massive step in reaching her final goal. So that's all from me.
Thank you so much, Karen. That was wonderful. Fantastic. I'm going to hand over to Elizabeth Hartley now, who is going to host the Q&A. Elizabeth, we could do 5 minutes and then we'll do a quick close and everybody can go back to their days. Over to you.
Yeah, so please feel free to come forward with any questions for our MDT members, if there's anything in particular you'd like to ask of them. Hannah, I'm not seeing any hands raised, but I don't know if I've got everybody on the screen. So if anything comes up, would you let me know?
I will do. There's no one at the moment.
To be honest, I'm not surprised, because I think, you know, what every member of the team, and you've only met some of them today, they bring so much enthusiasm, passion. They speak, you know, so vibrantly about what they do, how they do it, why they do it, what the impacts have. And I'd like to thank the team actually for their amazing contributions and their energy, and for really putting across so beautifully what they do and how they do it. Nicole, you've got your hand up.
Yeah, sorry, Elizabeth. I just really wanted to stress how important the MDT meetings have been to us as a team. Our first twice a week MDT meetings seemed like a lot, especially to a social worker, additional meetings on top of meetings, but they have been fantastic. And I think that's been really key alongside us as a team to make it work for that community. I don't know how I'd do social work without their meetings now.
Thank you. And thank you for adding that, Nicole, because I think, especially when people are really busy, giving up time to talk or reflect or whatever it is can seem like that's, you know, too much of a luxury. But I think what the team are experiencing is what you get back from that saves a huge amount of time in the long run. And Graham, I don't know if you guys would be able to do some sort of time and motion study for us, but that's kind of difficult to capture.
Yeah, it's amazing the journey that you've all been on, and I think, you know, the thing that we've seen a lot of in North Birkenhead is the humility of the individuals involved in this to realise there is a different way, there's a better way, and how much every professional that you've heard from today and all the professionals we work with in schools and the community sector just seem to be so willing to find a different way of doing this. But the thing that I hope everybody's taken away from this as well is a sense of joy and hope that is coming out of so many of the people involved in this project. It is this collective way of working is very different. You know, let's face it, the forces upon most people are about fragmentation. It's about splitting things up into their individual parts. And there's very, very few projects like this that actually bring so many people together. And, you know, Elizabeth's team is a great example of that. People coming from all different services to be based in a community centre at the centre of the community, but then the links they're building with the community, the links they're building with the community organisations is staggering, I think, Elizabeth.
Yeah, and I think the only thing I'd add to that is there's a real genuine sense of everybody being equal as well, where there's not hierarchies about what's on your, you know, your name badge, what your qualifications are, etc. Everybody's contribution is valued.
Fantastic. If there are no, oh, Lorna's got a question. Lorna, you're on mute.
Yeah, so I think that all of us, through those of us who've got longer careers in, so I've never been a professional in terms of doing this, but as a member of parliament, I spent a long time at the, you know, absolutely at the chalk face with people at different times, but that's a long time ago. And there've been pockets, I should imagine, in most of your careers where there's been microcosms of this. Okay, so I think that actually we've all known in our hearts that this is, you get the right people around the table. That is just the way, and people make the common endeavour more important than the, you know, the sum parts of the whole. So the question for me, so we talked about in my little stream about how we industrialise this in terms of recognising the USP of the individual. But I think some of this is, how do we shout about this loud enough to make sure it can't go into the annals of another brilliant project, but it really, really is something that punches through the consciousness. Because in the end, we are only a small group of people, and this problem exists in too many places. And so I think some talk about that, and I do think the humility of all of you, I know I said it, but it would be wrong, and especially because the project has got a lot of women involved, we're very, very good about making it about the purpose rather than about us. And I'm going to tell you, you cannot do that if you care about the purpose, because you, in how you have approached this in terms of your attitude, are as central to the outcomes as anything else. And so if I'm going to make a pledge to you, it's put that normal humility, women shit at the side about saying, oh, it was team, it was this, it was that, it was the other. You have to acknowledge and lean into your brilliance individually and collectively to allow other people to really replicate that. And you're going to find that uncomfortable and you're going to find it hard, but it is absolutely key to being able to industrialize this.
We've also got another question from Emma Dickinson in the chat earlier. So Emma said, it's great to hear about the reduction in referral and assessment times. She'd be interested to find out any more details about this, particularly data around save time that can be redirected.
Yeah, the report that we're going to produce for June for the committees will contain a lot more of that detail. It'll obviously be published on the council website, but I'm happy to pass that on to Graham or others to be circulated around the group so people can really get into that detail.
Fantastic.
Great, thank you.
I can't see any further questions at this point, so in that case, we'll move to close, but you have our details, so if there's any questions that come up afterwards, please let us know. So I think what you've hopefully got from today's session is a sense of actually, it's an utter privilege to do the work that we at Right to Succeed do, to work in communities like this with the individuals that you can bring together. And as remarkable as the individuals are in this community, we find remarkable individuals in every single community we work. So if you've looked at this today and gone, oh my goodness, how can we possibly do something like this in our community? Believe me, the leaders, the inspiring individuals will be there. They've just got to be found, unearthed and brought to the fore in all of this. The process that kind of gets to a project like this starts with discovery, and discovery takes a year. And that sounds like a very, very long time, but actually we're so used to moving at pace and making decisions and doing things to communities that actually in that process to get there quickly, we make a huge amount of assumptions. And actually, this is about a process that doesn't make assumptions. It's about a process that understands all the different views about the issues that are going on within that community and starts to form that kind of common agenda of actually what are we as a group of individuals that have an influence and a role within that community going to do about it together. So that's where this starts, and it starts with that discovery work. And what the collective group in North Birkenhead have achieved in year one is incredibly special, particularly considering the circumstances they've achieved, but it's also just the start. In terms of the process from here, we're already midway through discovery in Holton-Lee and Holton, in Northwood, in Knowsley, and we're looking to start discovery, working with Liverpool City region as the kind of major supporters of this, going into Liverpool, a community in Liverpool, a community of Sefton, a community in St Helens, starting from autumn next year. We'll be in touch with the individual local authorities through Liverpool City region in the near future to start to arrange meetings about whether this should move forwards. But I think in here you can see the learning already that is coming out of North Birkenhead. We're also very, very focused with Liverpool City region on how the learning from these communities can start to influence local, regional and even national policy, because for us, the answer for these communities is how much power and resource can we delegate down to collective decision making within these communities? Because I think what you've seen today is what people can do collectively when given the opportunity to do it and when working against a very strong kind of methodology. We're starting to see the outcomes of that kind of working, and we hope that actually we'll be able to replicate that in some of the most left behind communities across Liverpool City region. Before we go, I also have to say a special thank you to some of the funders that have joined us today: the Stephen Morgan Foundation, Shine, Bank of America, and the Peter Cundall Foundation have joined us as well. These people put money in out of love and care for the kind of communities we want to work and support, and without them this just wouldn't be possible. But I'm going to actually just leave you here on a final comment from one of our residents, because frankly that's where we should always leave a meeting such as this. But I'll end by saying, first of all, thank you so much to everybody that's contributed today. Thank you so much for everybody that's given 2 hours of their kind of working life to kind of join us. And I'll just leave you here on the wonderful comments of one of our residents, Karen Beasley. Thank you so much for your time, and we hope to see you all soon. Bye-bye.